Nobody's gonna be running down the aisle tonight, are they?
I don't think so.
Leave it alone.
You'll take care of them if they do. Okay, let's have a word of prayer before we begin. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for our time together, and I pray, Lord, that you'll help us to understand these virtues so that we can live lives that glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so just this is the third session, so we'll take a few minutes to look back in time. So with respect to virtues in general, we can think of the virtues as excellence. That is, as we embrace the virtues, incorporate them into our lives, we live better. Okay? And also that this excellence is not just an isolated act, but it's more like a habit. You know, this is, because you can say that I am my habits, you are your habits. Okay, what kind of person is that? Well, they always do this and they never do that. You know, it's, you know, whether these habits be good or bad or mixed, that is, you can
become a part of your being.
Yeah. And then the other thing I pointed out was that we ought to have a purpose, and as Christians, each of us have the same purpose, which is, do you remember what our purpose is? Glorify God, and secondly, enjoy Him forever. Okay, so I guess they structured that, the first part in our lives here, the second part in the hereafter. And I also pointed out that I read a little bit from a C.S. Lewis book, and he made the point that when we make choices, the choices change us. Okay? And they can change us for the worse, or they can change us for the better. So the more good choices we make, that elevates us more towards excellence. And the more we repeat good choices, that becomes more of a habit, etc. Okay? Last week we talked about, I'll interject here with respect to the life of excellence. We just observed Martin Luther King Day this week, and you remember what he's really famous for saying?
I have a dream.
And there was the other thing, and the dream is that my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that's kind of what we're talking about here is my character is my habits. Okay, that's who I am, is my character. And you would observe that by the habits that I keep. Okay? Then last week we talked about the first of the cardinal virtues, which is prudence. Now, did anyone do something prudent this week? More prudent than you might have done the week before. I had my moment of prudence this morning. I was out in the yard doing some yard work, and a guy came walking down the street, and he wasn't like a resident. He had this white T-shirt on with the Sherwin-Williams thing, so he's like what painters wear. And he asked me, he says, "How do I get out of here?" And I said, "Well, you take a left, then you take a right." And then I said, "Are you stranded?"
What are you doing here?
Well, I said, are you stranded? You know, because that might have been an opportunity for an act of charity, right? That's a virtue. And he said, "No, I just walked off a job." Okay, prudence kicked in. Okay, if you walk off a job, you're not happy, and somebody else is not happy either. I'm just going to keep my distance because this is not my business. And he was not in distress. I mean, he He was not bleeding or limping or anything like that. He was in good health. So that was my moment of prudence, because prudence is an intellectual virtue. Come in. That's quite all right. We'll get you to do the sign-in sheet. So we're just doing a review. Last week we had the virtue of prudence, and so the prudence is an intellectual virtue. It's about thinking. And so when this guy said he had walked off his job, I was thinking, I'm just going to let you go on, and I'm going to keep my distance, because bad things might happen if I got in the middle of this guy and his former employer. And so the virtue of prudence is that we use our intellectual capabilities to think about what's going to happen. Okay, because I have experiences, you have experiences, I learn from you, you learn from me. Well, if I do this, something good is more likely to happen, or if I do that, something bad is more likely to happen.
I was really chuckling about the guy being lost in there, because one night when we came over to Carol and Lou's, when we went out, we went that way, and I didn't think we were going to get out of there. We finally made it back to their house, but we learned from it. We never go that way again.
That's right. That's right. So now you will be more prudent in the future.
Up there in the head that you can't get there from here.
Yeah. So the other point I tried to make, and I hope this came across, is that prudence is more than just caution. I mean, to be cautious is prudent, but we can use prudence to think about what's the best good that can happen from these choices. Okay, so that's a little more complicated, and it took me a while to come up with that and then to think that through. So.
But you didn't think of helping him in his distress that he could not find his way out there.
Well, he was not in distress, like it wasn't raining or snowing. It was a nice day, so. There she is.
Right, yeah, nothing like being late, yeah, no, I had to go home. Here you go.
Okay, so so now we're gonna. I mentioned some books and movies, stories. Did anybody look at any of those?
I'm reading quite a
Which is fine. That you might find it out. Okay, so the second cardinal virtue is temperance. And as Bob and I were just talking, the word temperance gets somewhat misused through time. Does anyone ever go down to Coffee Love?
Yeah.
Coffee Love? Yeah. Have you ever been in the restroom there?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you look at that certificate that's hanging there?
Yeah,
Hey, do you remember what it is?
no, it's a little,
It's
but I know what you're talking about.
This is an old certificate, and it's big and it's beautiful and it's ornate, and it comes from England or Ireland or somewhere where some fella had joined a temperance society.
Yeah, and he got a certificate. Yeah, I didn't remember that.
Now, and in that context, temperance, they use the word temperance as for teetotalism. Okay, and you might have heard that before, right? Okay, that's not the definition that we're using. Okay, so the first thing I have to do is, if you have that connection in your mind, we need to cut that. Okay, because that's not what temperance is. Now we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through here. But anyway, so that's the first thing, is to say what temperance is not. Okay, in case you thought about that. But do go to Coffee Lab and do go look at this certificate, because it's impressive.
The bathroom is totally different than the rest of the store.
Well,
all the way around.
Buy some coffee and go read the certificate. You'll thank me for it. Okay, so, and again, these are just a whole bunch of notes that I copied directly from our book. Temperance is unique among the virtues. Unlike other virtues that are revealed under pressure, temperance is an ordinary, humble virtue to be practiced on a regular rather than an exceptional basis. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about courage. Well, a lot of times, acts of courage happen in times of crisis, danger, etc. Okay, so we're not talking about that. We're talking about, just like prudence, we should practice it every day. Temperance, we should be using it every day, and we'll get to the definition here in a minute. It is a virtue for all times, but it is all the more necessary when times are good. Well, when times are good, you have more stuff. When times are bad, you don't have much stuff, so temperance may not play in too much. And you can think of it as moderation. That's another, because you were asking about moderation. It is also unlike other virtues in centering not on actions, but on desires. So last week we had a thinking virtue, and now this virtue has to do with our desires. Okay? Now I came up with a thought, and so I wrote this down. I said, I want what I want, so what can I do about it? Right? Because you have seen people that are enslaved to their wants, right?
It's like, I want it now, on
That's
that
right.
commercial.
Yeah. Now, like speaking of teetotalism, like alcoholics, they're in a 12-step program because the alcohol has them, right? And they're trying to break that grip that alcohol has on them. We're not, temperance does not necessarily have to do with like an addiction like that, like a physical addiction, alcohol, drugs, or whatever. This is, A, this is not a 12-step program here, and B, when we think about temperance and these desires, we're not really talking about those substances that can get a grip on a person and really wreck their lives, okay? So I know I keep saying it's not this and it's not that, but we're working our way towards what it is. Since we desire what is pleasurable, now each of us has something we enjoy, so you can just think about that thing. Temperance is the virtue that inclines us to desire and enjoy pleasures well. So when we're talking about pleasures and temperance, the idea is that we enjoy these pleasures and we enjoy them properly. Okay? It helps us to desire pleasures in a reasonable manner. Okay, and then that sounds like moderation, right, Vicki?
Yes.
We're going to enjoy them in a reasonable manner, desiring them neither too much nor too little. The virtuous mean between the vices of self-indulgence and insensibility. Now, in the cardinal virtues that we get from Aristotle, he put things in the context of the virtuous mean is between the extremes. Okay? So the extremes here would be self-indulgence. I want to eat candy bars all day. Okay, that would be self-indulgent, right? So that's an extreme, which we all know that's okay. That's bad to eat candy bars all day. Now, the other extreme he talks about, or she talks about, is insensibility. And so I have an example of that going back to my childhood. And I don't know if this exactly happened, but it could have happened. So when I was a kid, we had these lots behind our house, behind our property that we lived on. So my brother and I would mow this stuff. And we had this push mower. So we, I'm talking elementary school, junior high. So it would take, I don't know how long it took, felt like days. So we would take turns. And I may have said this, or this might have happened, and you can vouch for me. And I might have said something like, hey, how about if we get a riding lawnmower? And the answer would have come back from my dad, it's not necessary. Okay, so that's my example of insensibility. It has nothing to do with ease, efficiency, get more work out of us, keep it mowed more, etc., etc. It's just not necessary. I would call that insensibility.
No, but
Or
his
insensitive.
his desire is for you to exert your effort to work, to give you a work ethic.
Yeah. Yes, but there was more to it than that. Ask my sister. Okay, so we want to be somewhere in between the self-indulgence and this, it's not necessary. This austere lifestyle. Okay. And again, I know I'm weaving my way towards a definition, which I hope is beginning to form in your mind. Temperance is not simply resisting temptation. It is more than merely restraint. Okay, so we're drawing a distinction here between temperance and self-control. Okay? I will not eat candy bars all day. I will never eat a candy bar again. That's like self-control. Complete abstinence. Temperance isn't about abstaining from something. Temperance is about enjoying something in the right amount. Okay, does that sound like moderation?
Yes.
So, and if you think about the Old Testament, there was to be fasting, right? But was there a life to be a continuous fast? No, because what came after the fasting? A feasting. Okay? So the instructions were not have a feast every day, and the instructions were not to fast every day. This is a time for fasting, this is a time for feasting. Okay? So we're looking for we're doing this for a purpose, we're going to do that for a purpose. Okay? So it's we're starting to get a sense of what temperance is. I know I'm saying a lot of things that it's not. One attains the virtue of temperance when one's appetites have been shaped such that one's very desires are in proper order and proportion. Okay? So when we're talking about temperance, we're talking about adjusting our desires. And we can do that. And that's good news, right?
So is that the same thing as saying balance?
Yeah.
Balance?
Yeah, a balance.
It will develop also self-control.
Right, and they're not identical, but
They are not identical, but it gives you another good, habit or quality where you can develop because you practice temperance.
and self-control can help us develop the habits which lead to temperance. When I was back to my childhood, Mom, I don't like green beans. Eat them, you'll learn to like them. You may have heard something like that in your childhood. But I mean, did you not find that to be true? That, do you have any water?
Yes, I do.
Can I borrow some?
I'm thinking about the temperance.
Can I have some Coke? Just kidding.
Sure, I hadn't opened it yet.
Sorry, Bob, go
I was
ahead.
thinking about the temperance, like I was telling, when we were in blacksmith class, you temper steel to get it to the proper hardness. It's a balance. You can actually temper it too far and it will shatter like glass.
Right.
That's right.
Or if you
Becomes
don't
brittle.
temper it properly, it won't hold an edge. Your knife, you might as well have a butter knife, cause it's a balance between what you can do and what you need to do and what you better not do.
Right. So, and obviously it comes from the same root word, right? Temperance.
Like making candy or toffee, you have the right.
Could you bring some next week? So we
Check it out.
We can try.
Or like walking a tightrope.
yeah.
Yes.
Stay in the
Right
middle.
out of balance
Stay
and
in the
sway.
middle,
Like
Yeah,
something
yeah.
Bob said.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you lose, you cannot walk. Too loose. If it's too tight, then-
Temperance is the virtue that helps us rise above our animal nature, making the image of God in us shine brightly. Okay, back to our purpose, to glorify God. And again, we talked first week about God has providence, animals have instinct, and we operate with prudence. So temperance keeps us from falling down into our animal nature, that instinctive behavior to eat as much as possible at every meal.
You get out of control. The animals guards themselves, and then they're laying there sleepy, and then they're vulnerable to other animals.
Right.
Right.
Speaking of animals, for humans, unlike animals, pleasure is tempered by understanding. Okay, so I'm gonna eat till I'm satisfied and not more. Now I in my younger day, I would go to some place like Pancho's Mexican Buffet or Golden Corral, and I went in with the mentality, they're going to lose money on me. Raise that flag. And that's bad thinking. But okay, I'm going to get my money's worth and more, and it's not healthy and it's not good, but that's where I was sinking down to my instinctive behavior. So I don't go to those buffets anymore. Okay, temperance is liberating. Okay, now that's the key. Temperance is liberating because it allows us to be masters of our pleasure instead of becoming its slave. Okay?
You learn to make that candy bar last all day long.
Yeah, only one.
Yeah. Enjoy it more. But now we don't. The point again. This is not a 12-step program here, but you have seen people, and maybe you've been this person yourself, where this thing I have has got to have it. Okay? Now, in my working career, I drank a lot of coffee, odd work schedules, etc., etc. So, I have, in my retirement, I have exercised some temperance, and I'm down to 2 to 3 cups a day. Okay? So, for me, that's not much. Okay? So, but part of it's I don't have the same schedule as before, and part of it is that I should get myself away from this. So I try to get away from needing caffeine to stay up all night, and simply enjoying the coffee and having a little caffeine on the side. So here's another way that I would phrase that. Do I have the vice, or does the vice have me?
Self-control.
Okay, and see, part of that's self-control, yes, but also with temperance, better choices, better habits, you break this control that thing might have over you. Okay? Now, how could I put this another way? Well, if do I enjoy this thing, something I eat, something I drink, some activity I'm engaged in, or am I compelled to do it even though I don't want to? You know, so if you're doing something you don't want to do, you need to get some temperance to get that thing in check. Okay?
Because you become enslaved to it.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of temperance is that you can get yourself free from some compulsions. Okay.
So what is the distinction you're making between temperance and self-control?
Okay, well, in temperance, it has to do with desires. So it's changing over time, changing your desires.
Self-control is not that?
Well, see, self-control is more like, I'm not going to do it. You know, cold turkey, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
But with temperance, it's find something that, you know, these pleasures, we can enjoy them, but enough.
I think that it's what the catalyst is. Self-control is mainly reining in bad habits.
Okay.
And temperance is enjoying good things, but not too much.
That's a fine line.
Very fine line.
Precisely.
But see, usually when you think of self-control, we think of our children growing up. You control your temper. You know, you control your appetites. You control, you know, you decide what is right and wrong. You know, and you see, and you have to have that self-control. It's just like you can train yourself not to need sugar. See, you should look at your children and say, I should train them to not be addicted to sugar or to like it. Don't feed them sugary food as they grow, and as adults they have an easier time of abstinence.
But you want them to enjoy too. I mean, God gave you that, you know,
Oh,
and
well,
everything
yeah,
for us to enjoy. He gave everything there in the Garden of Eden
That's
for us
right.
to enjoy except one thing.
Right.
You know.
Right. But
I have an example.
yeah, there you go.
We'll jump to toward the end of the note sheet. Sugar Lane brought water.
I'm sure I'm glad I did too. It's doing me so much good.
Too much coffee. So, the first time we met, I talked about the story Rikki Tikki Tavi,
Yeah.
and that's where it's a Rudyard Kipling story. It takes place in India, you know, the British colonial thing. So there was an English family that lived in this house, and one day there was a flood, and the young mongoose got washed down the river, and he washed up on their property. So they found him, and they thought, well, maybe he's dead, but he revived. So Rikki, one nice thing I liked about the story is that Kipling was explicit that, you know, Rikki Tikki knew that the whole purpose of a mongoose is to kill and eat snakes. So it illustrates the whole business of purpose. You know, that was, by instinct, he had that purpose. So he became the protector of the garden and the family, and pretty early in the story, he kills and eats a snake, and then after that, Kipling tells us he was careful to not overeat because he knows he must be ready to do battle with the snakes on the property. Okay, so he had killed a snake. Well, it's time for a feast because I've been so successful. No, I'm not going to feast now because there still might be a snake out there. So I need to be ready to go. Okay, so not the time for feasting. Now, then in the course of the story, he kills 2 more cobras. And then, when all the snakes are gone, that's when he feasts. Okay? So, yes, he enjoys the feast, but only after the work is done. Not when he needs to be at his best and he has to do battle with the snakes. Okay? See, he was temperate. Okay? Now, at a different point in the story, there was a bird, Darzy the tailor bird, was singing loudly after Ricky had killed the first cobra, the first of 2. So, the mongoose scolds Darzy and says, "Oh, you stupid tuft of feathers," said Ricky Tikki angrily. "Is this the time to sing?" Okay, so we're not talking about caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, ice cream, candy, food, anything. It's an activity that the tailor bird was engaged in, and Ricky Tikki says, "Is this the time to sing?" Well, no, it's not, because this is not the time to celebrate, because Ricky Tikki was chasing the other snake at that time. Okay, so that's another example of temperance, doing the right thing at the right time in the right amount. Okay, so see, it can apply to this is one of the heavenly virtues. The vice is gluttony, which we typically associate with overeating. So it's temperance that balances out against our tendency to be gluttons. Okay. But you can also, in my mind, gluttony can certainly be overeating. You know, if it's especially if it's just a habit that I have of overeating. But I think you can also expand that definition to, I want what I want and I want it now. You know, sort of a self-centeredness, demanding my own way. Okay, that would, whereas if I can move away from demanding my own way and be more give and take, more generous, etc., then that's the better way to live instead of demanding my own way.
This world will be happy. Everybody will too happy to live in. If that's the kind of world we live in, everybody practice that, then it would be paradise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, and just like, and when you do indulge, you know, like when you want something sweet, or you do, or you know, a mother will make cookies. It's always the deal of, okay, you can have 2. You know, and of course the child never wants just 2, but that's what you can have. You know,
Because there are other members of the family that
you know, so you can have 2.
right.
You know, and tomorrow you might get 2 more, or you might not.
Yeah. But see, that's where, as parents, you know, we try to guide our children.
Right.
You know, that's a way to instill temperance in them, Okay, well, you only get 2. And see, that's an external control on the child, but ideally, then they get the habit of, okay, well, I never eat more than 2 cookies at a time or whatever,
Yeah,
you know, okay?
one piece of cake, not 2.
So you're saying gluttony is the opposite of temperance?
Yes,
Yeah.
So a glutton could be a shopaholic, a workaholic?
absolutely.
Oh, you
Yeah.
betcha.
Right,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's being consumed by something. And typically we think of pleasure. I know somebody was telling me about some relative of theirs that a day does not go by that they don't order something off of Amazon.
Ooh, that could be expensive.
There's a lot of
You
people
wind
like
up
that,
on a lot
you
of
know.
debt.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why they have to rent, what we call this one, storage building, because, you know, and they even forget that they have those things in that shed or on that
Don't
storage
talk
building.
about me that way. I'm in the phase of life that I'd like to get
No,
rid
it's
of.
not only you done.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
he's
cleaning
got
my
this
house
thing.
now. I said, I didn't know that I have this.
Right,
Yeah.
but see, that's a symptom of modern America, where there's just so much stuff to be had,
Oh, yeah.
and our standard of living, for the most of us, is high enough that we can, yeah, I'd like one of those, and 3 of these, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, kitchen gadgets and your lawn care gadgets, and yes, I just bought a lawn care gadget this week. Laura told me to.
That's good.
Okay, time check.
6:08.
Okay, all right. So we're doing fine for time. Okay, so are you kind of comfortable with how I've described temperance and how it can apply in different? You know, it's not just temperance opposes gluttony, but intemperance can be much more than overeating. Okay.
Well, and I had, you know, growing up, even, things that we have for pleasure. Well, working with plants in the garden, reading. Mine was, I love to read, but you have to be careful that you don't read in exclusion of other things that you need to get done. You just can't read
Like
for.
housework.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just read for hours, and even as a young person, I had to be careful, because even in college, because the reading load was so great that you had to be sure and, get that done. But then for pleasure, and I've been known to literally get enthralled in a book and literally read all night. Look at my watch and I'm thinking, oh, good grief, it's time for breakfast.
So
And,
that's priorities.
yes,
Right.
yeah, see,
So-
so that's not being temperate.
Okay, so here's a couple of definitions which may be useful to you. One is to do the right thing at the right time in the right amount. Okay, today I'm fasting, tomorrow I'm going to feast. It's the right thing at the right time in the right amount. I'm not going to eat candy bars all day, because that's not that a candy bar is evil, but to eat all day, besides being not healthy, it's you're overdoing a pleasure. So here's another way to think. Oh, go ahead.
Say that again, to do the right thing
The right thing at the right time in the right amount.
in the right amount. And the right attitude.
Well, absolutely.
There you go, get that attitude.
Well, speaking of attitude, here's another way I've come up to define it. I will place a limit on a valid pleasure. Okay, and we're talking about valid pleasures. I'm not talking about, if you find pleasure shooting up heroin, that's not a valid pleasure. Okay.
It's not valid.
Okay. I will place a limit on a valid pleasure in order to achieve a greater good. We all agree that it's good to enjoy a pleasure. But enjoying this pleasure may not be the greater good. Okay? If you spend all your money on Amazon collecting stuff that fills your garage, and your kids are going hungry, you know, you have abused that pleasure of shopping on Amazon and collecting stuff because your kids are hungry. Okay, the greater good is to feed your kids.
I remember I cleaned out the garage one time, got my boat out, got all my junk out of there and parked her car inside. And just as we got through, looked up, and our neighbors were lined up out there at the end of the driveway.
Watching.
I couldn't believe it.
I can't believe you finally got that garage cleaned out, and not park her car inside.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a row of them out there. I didn't know they were aware of what I was doing.
People can change. See?
Now she sells my boat and I don't have to worry about that.
See, she limited your pleasure.
She's always been good for me.
That's right. That's right. Okay, any other, I've got just a couple other things. So is everybody pretty comfortable with how we've defined temperance? Okay. It did take a while to get to the definition, and part of it is because of misuse of the word. Okay. Now, in our book, and again, Dr. Pryor lists one book to read per virtue. Okay, I haven't read all those books because I know it's too much, but I've read some of them. But she recommended reading The Great Gatsby. Are you familiar with the book?
Not,
Yeah.
I think that shows gluttony.
Yeah,
From what I understand, and
Yes.
I want what I want, and I want it now.
Precisely,
Yes.
and so it was
That's what it's
the
about.
right
It's a
the book.
movie, isn't it?
The
Was it
book
the 20s,
illustrates.
wasn't it? The 20s?
Yeah, the
Yes.
20s, during Prohibition. Yeah, so the book primarily illustrates a lack of temperance
Yeah.
and how it led Gatsby down the wrong path. And so he was, and I think I watched part of a recent movie by that title, but I didn't watch the whole thing. But in any case, it ends badly and sadly. Okay, but it illustrates how, you know, taking pleasures to an extreme can lead to calamity. Okay, so and indeed, and so in studying the virtues, sometimes we can look at the positive aspect of a virtue, but then we can also look at the vice and see what happens where the vice takes you. And so the one way to define temperance is that it's not gluttony. You know, gluttony of overindulgence, of feeding your pleasures with no limit. Temperance is not that. Okay, so that's another way to help define things by what it is not. So we'll do that too. Time check?
6:15.
6:15. I'll take, I'll read a little bit of what C.S. Lewis wrote in the book Mere Christianity. Okay. Temperance is, unfortunately, one of the words that has changed its meaning. It now usually means teetotalism, like the certificate down at Coffee Lab. But in the days when the second cardinal virtue was christened temperance, it meant nothing of the sort. Temperance referred not specifically to drink, but to all pleasures. It meant not abstaining, but going the right length and no further. Okay? So we're talking about a valid pleasure, the right thing, at the right time, and the right amount. Okay? So that's where we are with that. Okay? Everybody good? Okay? You liking the class? Okay. I need a little validation here.
Where's the picture?
That's right. I need some stroking. Okay, so next week we have the third cardinal virtue, which is justice.
So justice.
Okay, and justice. I mean, all the virtues are important, but as I think I said last week, you know, we're going to study the virtues. We're going to look at one each week, but in reality, they all mesh together. Okay, because with prudence, we're looking for the good. With temperance, we're going to get we're going to work at getting our desires in check. Enjoy pleasures properly. Okay. Thanks again for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody signed the roster?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me pray and we'll be on our way. Lord, we thank you for our time together, and I pray that you'll help us to understand temperance better. Lord, help us to live temperate lives so that we can glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
As Bob told me last week,